We're going to continue on with our message that is focused on Easter. Hopefully last week there was some more aha moments as people heard about different things that were associated with Easter, whether it be what Lent is actually about, whether it's what is a shrove, what are hot cross buns, all these crazy little funny things that go on about Easter. And the most important thing is to be comfortable. To be comfortable about Easter. So if somebody walks up to you, if you are a believer and somebody walks up to you and says, "Can you tell me what Lent's all about?" You should be able to be comfortable enough to try to explain it. It shouldn't be something like, "Oh no, this terrifies me." Those people who aren't believers should also have the opportunity to start thinking about some of this stuff and say, "Okay, some of this stuff makes sense now." So, now you're going to have to listen really carefully here because this can be somewhat tricky, but it's not if you listen. Matthew 12, 38 to 40, the sign of Jonah. What we want to look at is the red part at the bottom. Jesus was always harassed by people like the Pharisees, who were the religious people at the time. Prove yourself. Show us who you are. As if he was some kind of trained dog that people could get him to sit and stand and roll over and all this kind of stuff. God doesn't do this. You should be able to believe without having to have some kind of tangible proof. However, during his entire ministry, there was one time, and one time only, and this is amazing, that one red line is huge. Really huge. He only ever said that he would prove who he was, and it would be very clear who he was, through the sign of Jonah. And he says here, "The Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." Everything rests on this. Okay? If this doesn't come true, everything falls apart. So this isn't just something he throws off. Now you're with me on this, okay? Right here, it's not hard to understand, but where we're going to go in a minute is where this gets complicated, but it's not complicated, which in itself is complicated. All right. I am God incarnate. I am God on earth, and you will know this because I will be in the ground for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, critical piece of scripture. The only time Jesus ever said he would give proof of who he was, therefore, if this doesn't happen, everything he said and promised means nothing. One little red line. Now, here we go with the complicated part. That's not complicated. Skeptics, non-believers, often point to this passage and a calendar to argue that Jesus and his teachings are not real. The argument is Good Friday is a day and a night. The Saturday is a day and a night. But Easter Sunday is only a day. The calendar shows us we are 1 night short. So what Jesus said is not true, and everything becomes invalid. That's the argument the skeptics say. The skeptics say it's not there. So this whole thing isn't true. And I know before I was a Christian, this was one of the things that drove me nuts. It just doesn't add up. But it does. Unfortunately for the skeptics, they are wrong, and the inherent flaw in the math is easy to explain. Part of the problem stems stems from people's concept of time. For example, a person works from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., and when they come home, their spouse asks them how their day was. Now, you've heard all this, right? This is not an uncommon thing. How was your day, honey? 6 to 11 is not day. That's night. You see where the confusion's starting to come up? You'll see this in a minute. And all of a sudden, like, when you actually see this, it's like, wow, yeah, this makes so much sense. Or to continue the confusion, what definition or point of reference do we use to determine what time 2 a.m. is? It's black outside, it's dark. Is that night? Or is 2 a.m. in the morning? One time, two definitions. What's going on here? This is getting confusing. Yeah, it is. Some confusion also comes when we try to apply our definitions of time to things in the Bible. Right at the very start, Genesis 1:5. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. A dark and a light equals a day. Now, here's where it's going to start to get clearer. However, the idea of day and night making a day is where the apparent time problem comes in that skeptics have trouble with. This is what happens. People forget that this part of the Bible was written over 2,000 years ago. And they had no clocks. So their method of telling time was based on the rising and setting of the sun. And with that recognized, let us once again take a look at how this math works out. We go back to the 2 a.m. thing. 2 a.m. is night by the original definition. But once we start getting clocks involved, that's where the second definition comes in. Okay? It's our clocks, it's our way of looking at things. It's like, we can get into this discussion later too. Did it take God an actual 6 24-hour days to make everything? Okay? Or is that just his way of referencing so we can understand? Our minds are pretty small. Like, if I ask you, I want you to picture 1 million loonies. You can't do it. It's just too big. It's just too big for your head. There are some things we can't wrap our heads around, and some of the things are like this. All right. So, here we go. Start the math. Thursday night before Good Friday starts at sundown. Alrighty? On Thursday, and it ends at sunrise on Good Friday. Thursday, the sun goes down, and that's the start of the night. The night stops when the sun goes up on the next day, which is Friday. So there is a night on the day we call Friday. You with me? Okay? All right. The day on Good Friday starts when the sun comes up and ends when the sun goes down. So call it 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Alrighty? Good Friday then has a day and a night. Just like the original thing, day and a night. But we're looking at it a little bit differently. A day and a night, because it comes in partially from Thursday. It starts on the Thursday, ends on the Friday morning. Night, day. Same thing happens with Saturday. Friday night of Good Friday starts with sundown. So say 6 p.m. on Friday, and ends at sunrise on Saturday. There's your night. Alrighty? On the day on Saturday starts at sunrise and ends at sunset. So Saturday has a night and a day. We all good with this? Okay. And we're saved when this happens. Saturday night before Easter Sunday starts at sundown on the Saturday, and it ends at sunrise on Easter Sunday. Okay? The day of Easter Sunday starts at sunrise and ends at sunset. So therefore, Easter Sunday has a day and a night. Okay, when Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb, it's daytime. It's not nighttime, it's daytime. So you've got the night and the day. How many nights? 3. How many days? 3. Which is exactly what Jesus said he would have. 3 days, 3 nights. He doesn't say 3 full days, 3 full nights. And I'm not pulling smoke and mirrors here. Simple. No problem with math once the time is understood. And this is not smoke and mirrors on behalf of Christians trying to make this work. So there's not a group of Christians going, oh man, we are in trouble. If we don't make this work, then everything is down the tube. No, it does work. It makes logical sense. And secular historians, non-believers, the guys who sit in universities and this type of thing, agreed that this was how time was reckoned 2,000 years ago. Any part of a day was considered to be part of the whole. So it's not Christians trying to do magic. This is actually, in fact, what it is. So it's the Christian thing, the secular thing. It makes perfectly good sense that there are 3 days and 3 nights. Math is done. Okay, next problem. Some of you who have been believers for a while, or even non-believers, scratch their head with this one. With the timeline problem solved, let us look at the resurrection, which is the foundation of our faith and beliefs. Now, this shouldn't be a source of confusion or doubt, yet some Christian denominations are actually open to the idea that this never occurred. And remember last week I told you that there was a church in Toronto, right here in Toronto, a Christian church that has an atheist minister who believes that Jesus didn't exist. So there's some real off-the-wall stuff going on out there. It comes back to you, and I'll say it probably 2,000 times more. What is in the book is where you go to get the answers. Okay? If somebody stands up here and says, hey, do you know that Jesus had 2 horns? And I'm a pastor, so I'm telling you what's true. So you go in there and go, hey, I heard that, the pastor told us Jesus had 2 horns. That's why he had long hair. He could never see the little nubs. Listen, if I'm convincing enough, some people would believe it. But then I come back to the thing and say, show me in the book where you see this. Okay, if it's not in the book, it's not real. All right, so let's take a look at Jesus' death. As some people will argue that he never really died, and that his death was part of an elaborate hoax. Okay, this was a big trick that people pulled. Mind you, some people will argue that Jesus was not a historical figure, even though there's lots of proof from non-Christian sources. There's a whole sermon on this that shows that Jesus was a real living person. The Jewish historians talk about him. The Roman historians talk about him. All the people who have got everything to lose. Okay? But people still say, oh, he wasn't real. All right. I want you to appreciate this too when we come into Easter. And this is going to be a little bit upsetting for some people, but it's supposed to be. The first step in Jesus' death was something called scourging. This, because sometimes we just think of him being hung on a cross and that's it. What he did for us was incredible. This was done with a short whip consisting of several heavy leather thongs with two small pieces of metal attached near the ends of each one. So think of a whip that's got like leather strings, 9, 10 leather strings, and attached to the end of each leather string is a piece of metal or bone. All right? The heavy whip was brought down with full force again and again across Jesus' shoulders, backs, and legs. At the first, the thongs cut the skin only. Then as the blows continued, they kept cutting deeper into the lower tissue, producing first an oozing of blood from the capillaries and veins of the skin, and then finally spurting arterial bleeding from vessels in the underlying muscles, deeper and deeper and deeper. The small pieces of metal first produced large, deep bruises which were broken over by subsequent blows. Finally, the skin of the back was hanging in long ribbons, and the entire area was unrecognizable mass of torn, bleeding tissue. When it was determined by the centurion in charge that the prisoner was near death, the beating was finally stopped. The prisoner was not supposed to die this way. Death was saved for crucifixion. He did not have to do this. He was the only person ever born that never had to do this kind of stuff. He was sinless. He went through step 1. That's step 1 for us. The next step was the thing that we all know, the crucifixion. Once up on the cross, the victim would have had his body weight suspended by their arms. In this position, it's difficult to completely breathe out. The victim would take shallow breaths for a while, but eventually he would be forced to push himself back up just to take a normal breath. At this point, this is what happens. The victim's weight is now fully supported by his feet, okay, just where the nails go through his feet. The nails through the feet would be likely to hit 2 major nerves running through the area. The result would be excruciating pain in the legs. I'm actually going to show you next week a nail from Roman time. This is an actual nail that was taken from a Roman archaeological dig. And it's the kind of thing that Jesus would have experienced. The nails in the wrists would be likely to pierce the main nerve running through the arm. As the victim pushed up to breathe, the wrists would rotate against the nail, irritating the nerves and causing intense pain in the arms. Some authorities also believe that the crucifixion position would dislocate the shoulder or elbow. Any movement would aggravate the pain from these injuries. The wounds on the victim's back from the scourging would push up against the rough part of the centerpiece. This would tend to reopen the wounds, leading to more pain and blood loss. This combination of pain would quickly force the victim to lower himself back down. Eventually, the victim would no longer be able to raise himself up, and he would suffocate. The shock from blood loss due to the scourging would hasten this process. Disgusting, yes. But you cannot sugarcoat or hide or make this look pretty in any way. You have to understand two things. This was his sacrifice for you. And secondly, can you go through those 2 slides that we just did and say to yourself, oh yeah, I think he lived. Yet there are some people who say, no, he did not. John 13:34, 1934, instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with a spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. You've probably read this if you've read the Bible, where they stab him and this liquid comes out. It's not blood, it's blood and water mixed together. Now, medical experts agree that this is an accurate description of how human blood separates at the time of death. These accounts in the Bible are true accounts, backed up by science. You don't get a little group of fanatics sitting there going, okay, we got to make this story look really accurate, so we got to do some science. They didn't even have science then. They didn't understand the idea of separation of blood. Yet this is reported in the Bible as just simply a fact, and this happened. Because they're just reporting. It'd be like, the sun was hot, the grass was green, the ground was dry, the blood and the water separated. They're not trying to do a pull the wool over anybody's eyes. He was dead. There should be no logical doubt that Jesus died considering what he endured. The next question that must be answered, as it is the basis of our foundation of faith and beliefs, is, was he resurrected? We're going to look at this in 2 parts. We'll look at one part today, and we'll finish the rest of it next week. And again, I'm telling you, there are Christian denominations that say, nope, didn't happen. And they come up with all kinds of great ideas. You're going to love some of these. Some skeptics will admit the tomb was empty, but they've come up with some real novel explanations for why it was. One was that Jesus was really alive and he snuck away. Now, this is ridiculous, as we have just seen, and it would defeat the statement concerning the 3 days and the 3 nights. The guy, before they put him on the cross, is practically dead. And after that description, can you see anybody pushing a big stone away? Good, nobody's around, I'm going to sneak away. Come on. Like, that's just stupid. And the same thing, and more importantly, it wipes out Jesus' thing about the 3 days and the 3 nights. That's just dumb. But people will tell you this. He snuck away when nobody was looking. Okay. Or the apostles stole his body. But this just conveniently requires that you forget the tomb was guarded by centurions, seasoned Roman soldiers. These guys, from our perspective, were like the SS in Germany. These guys were military nut jobs. They're told, guard the tomb. They would not let anybody near it. They would go down in death before that happened. So a bunch of apostles just sort of sneak up. Okay, all right, Peter, you keep the centurions busy while the rest of us roll the rock away. Then we're going to grab Jesus when we're sneak out of here. And then we'll roll her. Yeah, I see the smiles on your face. You already see the stupidness of this one too. But that theory has been rolling around also, that the apostles stole. Now this also requires the apostles to know that Jesus wasn't resurrected. So why would they all, except John, later die horrible deaths in Jesus' name? They all died horrible, horrible deaths because they firmly knew that Jesus died and was resurrected. Why would they go through that if they didn't know he was resurrected? These are not a group of 12 masochists. Oh, please kill me. Please hang me upside down and crucify me. They're not crazy. Another interesting story was the grave robbers stole the body. Now, the problem with this is the guards, and nobody had use for a body. And the only thing of material value in the tomb was the burial cloth. The burial cloth was valuable, yet it was there when Mary Magdalene came to the tomb. Like, why would grave robbers leave the most valuable thing and take the body? And what were they going to do with the body? Hey, anybody want to buy the body of Jesus? Like, well, what is this? Come on. Like, when you look at some of these things, it's just like, what were they thinking? But this is how some people are so desperate not to believe that they come up with these other things. Sometimes it is harder not to believe than it is to believe. But some people are so stubborn that they just don't want to give over that last piece. The religious leaders of the time had a lot to lose if the resurrection happened. So they did everything in their power to make sure that nothing in their control happened to the body. The religious Jews, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, their worst nightmare was to find the tomb empty. That was just like, oh man, so everything this guy was saying is true. He is the Messiah. He is the God incarnate. Oh man, we are in trouble. Everything just gets, they don't want this. They would do anything and everything to make sure that the body was there. The body wasn't there. Okay? And, okay, we're going to go on to this next week because you've seen the thing that he's dead. There's a pretty good example, first of all, to get rid of some of these crazy theories. Next week, we're going to take a look at the final proofs that he was resurrected. That will be our last message right before Easter. Now, just before we, as this is the middle of these messages, if you're a believer, I just want you to stop and think about the amazing sacrifice that Jesus made for you. Think about some of the troubles you have and compare them to Jesus. Think about the forgiveness message. Jesus came to teach us to love. Can you not get over something and forgive somebody? Learn to be a better person. This is a fantastic time, and unfortunately we don't look at it all year long. It's a fantastic time just to take a look at what this sacrifice is and what it meant to us. Those of you who aren't believers yet, just stop and take a look at the overwhelming amount of proof and what this whole story means. And all you have to do is, like Jesus is standing on the platform at a train station, and he's holding out a ticket to you. And he says, my friend, you can get on this train and it won't cost you a cent. All you got to do is accept it. What an amazing gift. And it costs you nothing. And once you start walking with it, is your life going to be better? Yes. Will it be perfect? No. Will the problems go away? No. But you will be a better person in the long run.